All right. Hi, hello, and welcome to the Sophos MDR ThreatCast. My name is Greg Eden. I'm a security strategist for the MDR service. Joining me today is a podcast as always. We've got Morgan Dembowski from Threat Intelligence and Colin Cowie, also from Threat Intelligence. We've got Pavlo Kulam from Threat Hunt, and we've also got Sean Gallagher from the Exos Threat Research team. Let me jump to the agenda. So we're going to have Morgan take us through the threat landscape, and then Colin sort of take us through what we've actually been seeing there within the MDR service. Then Pavlo's going to take us through a couple of hunts. Oh, no, he's going to be taking us through one hunt because I've made him nick one of them. Apologies, Pavlo. One of those we want to get lifted up to the vendor through some kind of disclosure because they've stumbled across something kind of cool. Hopefully we'll talk about it in the future. And then Sean's going to take us through some of the XOps reviews. So looking at some posts that we made over the last sort of, I think the last 30 days. I think it's sort of been over the last month as well. And then also take us through a specific piece as well. And then we'll do Q&A at the end. I'm not going to do the MDR Most Unwanted this month because it actually has a bit of overlap with last month. So if you go onto the blog post in the MDR community for last month, there's the sort of the image. The advice in there is still very relevant. So make sure you use that and then disseminate that to your staff and so on to get them informed. As always, if you've got any questions as we go, there's the Q&A panel. You should be able to see there on the right. So feel free to throw any questions as we progress. What we'll do is we'll either answer those live if they're important, we think it's sort of relevant, and we have time, of course. We'll either then answer it in the Q&A sort of chat panel itself, or we'll hold on to it and we have a Q&A set right at the end for this webinar. And then we always get this question. Yes, there will be a video recording and the references and everything will be uploaded to the MDR community roughly within the next sort of 24, 48 hours or so. So keep an eye on the MDR community channel where we'll post that. Then also, I believe we're now posting this on the Sophos XOps YouTube channel. So you'll be able to find this video recording also on YouTube. But with that, I think we've kind of got past the things that I need to talk about. So let's pass on to someone else. So Morgan, you want to come join us on stage and take us through the threat landscape? Thank you so much, Morgan.
Having a lovely Wednesday so far. Let's get into some fun threat landscape stuff. So starting off with a few vulnerabilities here. So on August 22nd, SonicWall published a security advisory regarding a critical improper access control vulnerability in SonicOS, which is the operating system that powers several SonicWall firewall models. And what it could allow for is a remote attacker to gain unauthorized access to resources and, in some cases, under specific conditions, the ability to the firewall. And as of September 9th, there have been several recent incidents reported where SonicWall SSL VPN accounts were targeted or compromised by ransomware groups, including some reports that Akira ransomware affiliates have been recently gaining initial access by compromising SonicWall SSL VPN user accounts. However, evidence linking these compromises specifically to CVE 40766 is still pretty circumstantial. The SonicOS firmware on the affected devices were within the versions known to be vulnerable to this vulnerability, but they cannot say for sure whether the Akira actors are exploiting that specific vulnerability. However, despite if we know 40766 to be specifically exploited, we do know that there is a very strong adversary interest in SonicWall software in general. So it's highly recommended to go ahead and upgrade SonicWall products to the latest versions, as well as, if you can, restrict firewall management and SSL VPN access to trusted sources and ensure that they're not accessible to the public internet. And lastly, go ahead and enable MFA for all locally managed SSL VPN to be safe. Moving on to the next vulnerability we have here. So on September 4th, the backup and recovery software provider VM released their September security bulletin disclosing several vulnerabilities in their. And one of the more critical flaws of those was CVE 40711, which is an unauthenticated remote execution vulnerability impacting VM's very popular backup and replication solution. And successful exploitation of this vulnerability could allow an attacker to gain full control of a system, as well as manipulate data and potentially move laterally. And it's interesting, there's actually a lot of reporting out there that this CVE is actually comprised of two separate components. So an improper authorization bug and a deserialization bug. And it appears that VM patched these two separate bugs in two separate releases that were about 3 months apart, despite VM being notified of the vulnerabilities or the bugs at the same time. So there's been some debate over why that may be. Maybe fixing the two different bugs required different QA processes, and one was ready, so they silently pushed the fix in order to get it out there as soon as possible. That's one theory. Another theory is that VM possibly released two different patches in an effort to downplay the vulnerability, pushing the improper authorization component silently without a security advisory, which in effect would downplay the real deserialization bug to a lesser severity, to one that requires authentication. So there's a lot of theories going around about what the nature of that patch release was. But in terms of exploitation in the wild, there's been no confirmed exploitation of this. But ransomware groups have been very well known in the past to exploit vulnerabilities in VM backup in replication to gain access to organizations' backup infrastructure. So the likelihood of exploitation is quite high because of the effectiveness of compromising systems and potentially creating double extortion scenarios. I mean, there's really no big point in deploying ransomware and encrypting files and systems on a target unless you can deny access to backups so they are easily able to restore their operations. So the recommendation here is for VBR users to immediately update to the latest version. There is some mention in research by Watchtower specifically that the latest patch doesn't fix the vulnerability completely. They weren't able to provide a lot of details about why they think that may be, but I believe that more details will be published in the future. So this will definitely be on. Moving on to the last vulnerability we're going to be chatting about. So researchers at Microsoft recently discovered and reported a new vulnerability in Google's Chrome browser tracked as CVE 797, which Google has acknowledged and released a patch for. So this vulnerability is described as a type confusion bug in the underlying JavaScript and WebAssembly engine in Chrome. And type confusions occur in the underlying engines. It's usually the result of code performing its expected operations on an object that is not of the expected by the code, which can be manipulated and exploited by threat actors. And a threat actor can exploit this vulnerability by injecting malicious code via web pages viewed in the Chrome browser, which can enable them to gain remote code execution in the sandbox Chromium renderer process, but also allows them to execute commands or gain unauthorized access to sensitive data. And in the research released by Microsoft, they report with high confidence that their observed exploitation of this vulnerability can be attributed to a North Korean threat actor targeting the cryptocurrency sector for financial gain. And they believe that threat actor to be a group that they track as Citrine Fleet. And Citrine Fleet has been known in the past to create fake websites masquerading as legit cryptocurrency trading platforms. And then they use those to either distribute fake job applications or trick targets into downloading a weaponized cryptocurrency wallet or trading application. And the exploitation they observed of this vulnerability aligns with the typical stages that you would see in browser exploit chains. So they likely use social engineering to direct the users to an attacker-controlled exploit domain that then serves the 7971 exploit. And then after remote code execution is achieved in the sandbox Chromium renderer process, a shellcode containing a Windows sandbox escape exploit and the FUD module rootkit is downloaded and then loaded. So this sandbox escape exploits a vulnerability in the Windows kernel that, once successful, runs that FUD module rootkit in memory, which is a pretty sophisticated rootkit that employs DCOM techniques to establish admin to kernel access to Windows-based systems. And so while this is not being widely exploited by various ransomware actors, it can lead to pretty severe compromise. So in terms of recommendations here, really just ensure that your Google Chrome and Microsoft Edge web browsers are updated in order to address this vulnerability. All right, so that finishes off what we have for the vulnerabilities. Now to some notable news. So we're going to be talking about two takedown operations that took place in the last month. So the first is the disruption of a large multi-tiered botnet called Raptor Train, which consists of SOHO and IoT devices operated by a nation-state Chinese threat group known as Black Typhoon, who works for a company called the Integrity Technology Group. And a little bit of background here. So since its estimated formation in mid-2020, Raptor Train, the botnet malware, has infected more than 200,000 consumer devices, including Soho routers, NVR, DVR devices, network-attached storage servers, and IP cameras, which Lumen's Black Lotus Labs, which discovered the botnet, says makes it one of the largest Chinese state-sponsored IoT botnets discovered to date. And researchers have discovered activity from this botnet targeting specifically U.S. and Taiwanese entities in several, so including military, government, defense, IT, and more. In terms of the disruption operation, authorities took control of the hacker's computer infrastructure and, among other steps, sent disabling commands through that infrastructure to the malware on the infected devices. And interestingly, they said that during the course of the operation, there was an attempt to interfere with the FBI's remediation efforts through a distributed denial of service attack targeting the operational infrastructure that the FBI was using. But that apparently did not stop the FBI's disruption efforts, since they ended up being successful. But in terms of significance here, this is the second time this year that the Department of Justice has disrupted a botnet of consumer devices used by PRC hackers to conduct attacks. So among other things, the FBI's investigation revealed that a publicly traded China-based company is openly selling its customers the ability to hack into and control thousands of consumer devices worldwide. The company had built an online application called KR Lab that allowed its customers to log in and control specified infected victim devices. So this operation really reinforces U.S. law enforcement commitment to target PRC-controlled botnets in the infrastructure that they use to facilitate their. Okay, the second takedown that we're going to be talking about is called Operation Curb, and I apologize if I am butchering that pronunciation, but this involved a joint law enforcement operation to take down an international criminal network using a phishing-as-a-service platform called iServer to unlock stolen or lost mobile phones. So this operation involved a joint effort by law enforcement from several different European and South American countries, such as Spain, Chile, Colombia, Peru, and more. And as a little bit of background here, the iServer phishing-as-a-service platform, which was active for over 5 years, is reported by law enforcement investigators to have targeted over 1.2 million mobile phones and claimed approximately 483,000 victims worldwide. So in a nutshell, iServer is an automated phishing platform that really focuses on harvesting credentials from cloud-based mobile platforms to unlock stolen phones. So basically, if your phone is stolen, they would try to target you with bogus messages urging you to locate your lost phone by clicking on a link that would take you to a landing page, prompting you to enter your credentials, your device passcode, and 2FA codes that the attackers would then use to gain access to your stolen or lost device, turn off lost mode, and then unlink the device from your account. So it was primarily used by Spanish-speaking criminals in North and South America, but it had recently expanded its reach into Europe and other regions. In terms of the takedown operation, it took place between September 10th and 17th. It resulted in 17 arrests, 28 searches, and 921 items seized, mainly mobile phones, but also other types of electronic devices, vehicles, and weapons. And the arrest included the administrator of the phishing platform, who is an Argentinian national that had been running various phishing services since roughly 2018. And during the course of their investigation, investigators identified more than 2,000 hackers who had been registered in the phishing platform over the years. So in terms of significance here, this is noted as the first time that Europol's European Cybercrime Center, known as EC3, coordinated an international operation together with the Specialized Cybercrime Center of America. So it was the result of a long-run investigation starting in 2022 that began with a tip-off from Group IB. So this is a really great example of not only international law enforcement cooperation, but also of public-private collaboration to dismantle an expansive cybercrime. So it sets a great precedent for future collaborations such as this. And then lastly, we're going to be talking about the ransomware leak site analysis. So there's one thing that I really wanted to zoom in on here. So under Rising, you will see that we have Monty ransomware. So as a little bit of background here, in mid-August, it was reported that Monty had resumed its malicious activities after about a 2-month break from exposing victims on their leak site. So this time, they are reportedly taking a focus on organizations in the legal and government sectors, and they're sporting a new Linux-based ransomware variant. And Monty was first discovered in 2022, very shortly after the infamous Monty ransomware group split apart. And there are reportedly a lot of overlaps between Monty and Monty, as you can see within the names themselves. But Monty seems to be moving away from their Monty affiliation. The older version of their ransomware reportedly had a 90% similarity rate to Conti ransomware, but analysis shows that this latest version only shares about a 29% similarity rate and uses a different encryptor that holds victims' data hostage until a ransom is paid. So likely, these Monty ransomware actors are trying to evade their chances of detection by altering Conti's code that a lot of defenders already know. And previously, Monty hadn't really gained a lot of attention because of their relatively low sophistication and their low-ish volume, but it's likely that they've made enough money now to reinvest some of their ransom payments into ransomware development and building new and better code. So we might continue to see an uptick in attacks by Monty as they continually develop their ransom. But that brings us to a close on the threat landscape. I will hand it over to Colin to give us some insight into observed threat activity.
Thanks, Morgan. Let's take a look at what we've seen within our Sophos MDR and incident response services in terms of the most active ransomware over the past month. Number one is Fog ransomware. We assessed with high confidence that Fog is a ransomware as a service. To be more specific, there are 2 different unique threat activity clusters that we've seen hop around between multiple different ransomware as a service programs that have now switched to Fog ransomware. One of those Sophos threat activity clusters previously was active on Akira ransomware, but it's important to note that, as you can see on this chart, we are still continuing to see Akira ransomware cases despite some affiliates moving away from Akira. Another one that's number 2 on our list is Black Suit. If you haven't heard of Black Suit before, it's actually a rebrand of what was previously called Royal ransomware, and we believe that Black Suit is directly tied to the Conti ransomware crew, specifically one of their teams that was identified through the Conti leak. Number 4 on our list is Ransom Hub. Ransom Hub first emerged in February earlier this year, which is around the same time that the United States law enforcement took disruptive actions against Alpha V or Black Hat ransomware. We don't necessarily believe that Ransom Hub is directly related to Black Cat or Alpha V yet, but there's definitely some movement of affiliates that have moved from Alpha V to Ransom Hub, and I think that Ransom Hub is kind of filling that void that was created when Black Cat was disrupted. And then the last on our most active ransomware list for this month is Cicada 3301. This is a relatively newer ransomware group that does operate a data leak site. We've only seen just 2 cases with this so far, and we're not quite sure yet if it's a ransomware as a service or a specific group that just emerged, but it's one that we're aware of in our track. Now let's go over a interesting case study, but before we start talking about this case study, I wanted to introduce a term, which is AITM, or adversary-in-the-middle. Adversary-in-the-middle is an attack technique that involves intercepting session tokens. Typically, this is through a phishing email that then has a landing page that will hijack session tokens or MFA tokens, and from the user, it looks like you're authenticating to the legitimate service, but then the adversary will automatically leverage those session tokens to authenticate to the victim's services and gain privileged access. This is a very popular technique leveraged in business email compromise intrusions. Threat actors will gain access to these inboxes and create new forwarding rules that will then pass along emails of sensitivity or of note to the threat actor. So this might be something that includes wire transfer information or other useful details that might help them further social engineer the victim. Over the past couple years, adversary-in-the-middle phishing has gotten easier for threat actors to do due to the rise of services. There are different cybercrime forums where threat actors will sell adversary-in-the-middle kits that make it easier for them to deploy these services and do things like bypass MFA. It's also kind of just a generic term to classify a wide range of attacks that involve intercepting traffic and leveraging that to perform malicious activities. One specific case of AITM that we wanted to highlight is over the past month, we had an MDR customer where one of their business leaders was traveling and they received an email that they believed was related to the reason they were traveling. And when they clicked on that email, they got a prompt that looked like Microsoft multi-factor authentication. They provided their code, and unfortunately, it actually was a threat actor operated phishing site. And at this point, the adversary then relayed those credentials automatically to their malicious infrastructure. And our current working theory is that they have a team of operators that monitor new infections and then take advantage of those initial infections to do some initial reconnaissance. In this case, the reconnaissance was discovery of a couple of files on the SharePoint server. This activity did trigger a Sophos MDR detection for our adversary-in-the-middle. Specifically, we were looking at the operating systems and user agent strings in the sessions and thought that something was suspicious or that this could potentially be traffic related to an AITM kit that we have been tracking for the past couple months. Our Sophos MDR operations team reached out to the customer and informed them of this activity and provided them with a series of recommendations to help them remediate this intrusion, which included disabling the account, revoking the sessions, and changing the passwords. And within 30 minutes of that notification, the victim organization was able to take those actions and help remediate and prevent this intrusion from becoming more serious or severe. And before we move on, I just wanted to remind folks that you can find integrations within the Sophos Central under the Threat Analysis Center dashboard and integrations management. The last observed threat activity section that I want to highlight for the ThreatCast this month is on dual-use tools. Dual-use tools is a generic term that we use to classify software that isn't inherently malicious but can be abused by threat actors or people with bad intentions. Dual-use agents is a subset of these tools that help facilitate remote access, command and control, and persistency. The graph that you can see on the right here is data from over the past calendar year or 365 days. This includes trends from our incident response and managed detection response service around what different tools we've seen in intrusions. And these tools are leveraged throughout all different stages of incidents, from initial access to helping facilitate the deployment of ransomware. The second tool on the graph in terms of the most frequent is PSExec. I just wanted to highlight that PSExec is actually blocked as a potentially unwanted program by default within Sophos Central and for the Sophos products. So unless you've taken steps to exclude PSExec, that is already blocked for you. However, the rest of the applications in this graph are able to be blocked under application control. I definitely recommend people get a good understanding of what tools are being leveraged on their network and then start to take steps to reduce risk of unneeded tools. Specifically, we've seen a lot of threat actors leveraging AnyDesk, ConnectWise, PuTTY, Atera. And then an interesting trend we've noticed over the past year is the adoption of OpenSSH. OpenSSH is used by a variety of different IT administrative purposes, but we've also seen some threat actors starting to use that to facilitate remote access and management. So if you haven't established a robust application control policy, I definitely encourage folks to get into Sophos Central, check out their current existing policies, and see what they can comfortably block within their organization. That's it for this month's observed threat activity. Now I'll be passing the mic on to Pavle for the threat hunting highlights.
Great. Thank you so much, Colin. All right. Hello, everyone. Just wanted to, before we actually move on to the next slide, just wanted to remind the audience that it's going to be slightly lighter on content as the second hunt that we prepare for today through our research, we actually discovered that it was rare enough, significantly rare, and not very published. So we thought that it warranted a responsible disclosure to the vendor. So we wanted to ensure that we go through the right process, and until everything is settled, we'll just omit that piece, and we'll make sure that in the future, once we get the green flag for it, we'll actually present the content, as I'm sure it's going to be very relevant and interesting. So that being said, we're going to continue with a similar theme that Colin mentioned in his section. We're going to talk a little bit about Outlook C2 and how it can be abused through registry and registry keys. This entire hunt is rooted in a old capability that good old thick clients that were kind of standalone applications that didn't have any tie-ins with Office 365, Microsoft 365, or cloud infrastructure as a whole. So everything was kind of self-contained, which is what Outlook used to be. One of the capabilities that Outlook had was to customize web content within custom folders of every mailbox. This could be set up by the users themselves if they had permissions through group policies, or it could be set up by system administrators as they set up domain accounts for the Outlook users. That content would then be loaded, the HTML or web content would then be loaded every time a user clicks on a folder. And as you can already imagine, that could potentially be abused. In this case, we kind of found ways that they could be abused, and there's some publications around how it can be abused. So I want to give a brief history about how that started off and how we ended up here and what kind of hunting we've conducted on our end to actually cover off that specific technique. So again, back in the olden days, there was actually a menu option, a configuration option that would allow you to set up a home page for every folder. That home page could then host either HTML content or script-related content as well, including COM extensions. For those of you who may not be familiar with COM, COM is a relatively older method of passing on command line executions and commands, operating system commands, to the command prompt. So that started off in the DOS days and kind of permeated as we got into more complex infrastructures. But ultimately, a COM file is very much as a batch file or a script file. It serves to pass on a command to the prompt. In this case, the actual websites that are being read and parsed by Outlook could also pass on the COM extension strings to the operating system, which, as you can imagine, would enable an attacker with a sufficiently crafted COM file to actually execute commands on the victim system every time that they click on a folder that has any sort of web content. This was discovered a few years ago and has been abused in the wild as well. So Microsoft decided, you know what, we're not going to offer this functionality at all anymore. This can obviously be abused. It doesn't really serve the purpose that we imagined it would. And they took that menu context out of the actual application and said, you cannot customize this ever again, and everything is peachy. Or is it? So of course, Microsoft being Microsoft, they also wanted to ensure that there is some backwards compatibility with the users and domains or companies that still utilize older versions of Outlook. So how did they do that? They actually created a support page on their website that says, hey, we know that you don't have this functionality anymore. Just in case you still wanted to have it, there is a registry key that will do the exact same functionality. So if you actually look on the screenshots in the HKey current user, under software, Microsoft Office, and in the version of the Office, under Outlook Web View, there is an entry called inbox and a URL key. The URL key starts off blank by default. However, it can be modified by a user with sufficient permissions. If it is modified, then that web content URL key becomes the default key, default HTML file that is going to be loaded by Outlook when you click on a custom folder. So as you can imagine, that is going to serve the exact same functionality as the previously enabled configuration options menu, because it was going to, it still had the same functionality of loading HTML, JavaScript, as well as COM extension files, which can serve to, in clear text, pass on command line arguments to the operating system and potentially enable C2 communications, persistence mechanism, anything that would enable the attacker to kind of get that foothold onto the user system. So this has now permeated for a number of years. The initial menu context was removed back in 2017, I believe, and it still permeates to this day. However, the newest versions of Outlook, the ones that are specifically designed to work off of the cloud, the Microsoft 365 cloud and the Office 365 architecture. That suite is not a standalone application anymore. It is more like a thin hybrid client that is heavily rooted in HTML. And as such, it does not actually allow neither the context of the web page and the functionality of having a web page per folder, nor does it allow the actual registry entry to exist and to be modified. So that functionality has been completely removed with the newest version of the Outlook. However, that newest version of the Outlook does have to be manually enabled, either through clicking in the screenshot on that try the new Outlook button, or through GPO that would then kind of force that upgrade to the next version of Outlook for all the users on the domain. So there is a fix for it, but that's not to say that everybody's going to be living on that specific version. So if you are an organization that has the ability to transition over to the next version of Outlook, this is our recommendations in terms of closing out this specific loophole, as the previous versions may still have those registry entries that could be modified by the attackers if they have sufficient privileges to actually modify registry keys. In terms of the hunting that we actually did, we started off with a simple hunt, which is this one here, which basically, if you look at the last two lines, it looks for any modifications to that specific key. The web view key will almost never, if ever, at least we've seen through our research, would never be manually modified by either a user or even the system itself that is outside of the context of, for example, installing the Office itself, that would actually then add that specific key to the registry hive. So the users, scripts, PowerShells, any sort of remote connections, for example, would never modify manually, at least from what we observe, this specific key. So this is a relatively easy piece of information and data to hunt for within your data to see whether there are any modifications that are kind of anomalous or have anomalous parent processes that could potentially indicate malicious activity. This should also be coupled, if there are sufficient pointers to show that there is malicious intent. This should also be coupled with exploring the relationships between Outlook as a parent process, launching any sort of command line strings or context that could be translated into a COM extension containing instructions for the operating system itself. So that's kind of the secondary step that you would do, but this is a great starting point. It's something that should be relatively simple to implement in your environment. And that's it for me. And I'm now going to go pass it over to Sean, who's going to go some great XOps research. Thank you.
I'm Sean Gallagher. I'm the principal threat researcher for Sophos XOps. I'm going to go over some of the things we've got and we published so far this month. And with that, with no further ado, I will jump right into those. So we've had a couple of things we've published earlier this month. One driven entirely by MDR. I worked with Mark Parsons and Morgan Dembosky on a second part to our look at Crimson Palace, the campaign we saw in a government agency in Asia targeted by Chinese threat actors, Chinese cyber espionage campaign there. This is our wrap up on that report. We've seen additional activity around that malware that was involved with the original campaign, or at least threat clusters. And we continue to watch for other activity elsewhere that spread beyond the original organization, particularly with the group we called Cluster Bravo. Another post we put out on September 12th is from Neil Watkins, who is our VP of engineering for the Windows platform, that's standing on the Windows platform waiting for change. This is an explanation of how we use kernel technology in Windows. It's a response to the Microsoft Summit that followed the CrowdStrike problem last month with causing blue screens of death. That is, we go into our architecture, how we work, why we use kernel drivers, and what we do to prevent the sort of thing that happened with the CrowdStrike issue. And then also there was a new Patch Tuesday on September 12th, a number of vulnerabilities. I encourage you to all review that article and make sure that you have deployed patches or done any sorts of modifications to your platform, your environment, to get around those issues. also this month, we published an article on the Atomic macOS Stealer, or AMOS. This is the most predominant info stealer hitting the macOS platform. It's designed to attack systems and steal sensitive data like passwords, cookies, cryptocurrency wallets from Macs specifically. Been around for about a year, a little bit longer than a year, but it has emerged as the most predominant info stealer we see in the macOS environment. And info stealers account for more than 50% of the detections we've seen over the past 6 months in terms of malware in that environment. It's been advertised on the Telegram messaging platform, sold through Telegram channels. It costs now $3,000 a month for somebody under basically the malware as a service business model. This is very similar business model to what we see on the Windows platform with Agent Tesla and other info stealers that operate as malware as a service. It generally gets deployed via malvertising. So way it gets pushed out is advertisements are placed online for free software or for low-cost software or for versions of commercial software that draw users to download what look to be legitimate application installers to the Mac environment. However, they are also carrying the AMOS, carrying the Atomic macOS Stealer. And so, as I mentioned, we look at malvertising as a primary vector. We've seen a number of different tools like Clean My Mac, a bunch of other commercial tools like Norton, Slack, for example, Slack Business. An advertisement for Slack Business was used to tempt users into downloading the InfoStealer. And then there are also payloads hosted on GitHub and on custom domains. So we see a number of evolving capabilities over the past few years, including they're doing a bunch of string obfuscation to make it more difficult to figure out what's going on with the contents of the application. Also, they're offloading functionality from the installer to a Python dropper to deploy more malware. We also have seen that the developers have stated they have a variant that specifically targets iPhone users, but we have not observed that in the wild. And with that, I will pass it back to Greg.
All right, thanks, Sean. So yeah, if anyone's got any questions, feel free to throw them into the Q&A panel on the right. I think I've got a few here. Let me just grab this one. So I'll try and paraphrase some of these. So what should we do about back emails like that? So I think this is going to be in relation to Colin's slide talking about attack in the middle, saying, so rephrase the question, what should we do about back emails like that? Can we just rely on detections from MDR? So this, I guess, is when actually probably a great point to go back to the slide. In that we pointed out something, I can't remember if we covered it in detail, but let me just put the slide back up on the screen. So when it comes to attacker in the middle emails like so, you can actually, so I mean, of course, user awareness is always key. You really just got to make sure users know about, that there's going to be phishing out there. You've got to do phishing simulations. I think through simulations have always been a really potent way to do these things, which is give your staff a safe way to fail. So use kind of we had something called Phish Threats. I can't remember if we still have that. But, there's plenty of tools out there that you use to simulate a phishing attack on your staff. And if they then go and, accidentally, click the link or fill in the form, it comes back to you rather than an attacker. And, you can use that as an opportunity to then, educate the users on the behavior mistake that they made. Because, of course, sometimes proactive training where you just go and say, hey, everyone, watch this video doesn't really land well. So sometimes failing, giving people, especially helps you find risky users, but it helps you reduce that risk by educating them at the point that they failed. So it gives them nice little moments. And then like another way that I implemented a long time ago with an organization that was really struggling with this problem, which was I kind of suggested they set up an email address like, let's just say it's security@yourcompany.dld. And they say, so you should then incentivize your staff that anything fishy, anything suspicious, just forward it, send it on to that email address that your, IT team, security team monitors. And once a month, you do like a raffle draw for like an Amazon gift card or something. And what then happens is by offering security, start incentivizing people to then just send anything over that they think even possibly is fishy, right? People behavior changes when you offer reward. The other thing you can also do is, we've got it on the screen here, is you can actually submit the suspicious email to Sophos Labs. So there's a URL there. Don't worry about writing right down right now. We'll put it in the MDR community where, answering someone else's question, yes, there's going to be a recording where you'll also find the recording, and you'll find all the show notes. In the show notes, you'll find this hyperlink in there. But this is a knowledge base article which then just takes you through how to actually submit something to Sophos Labs. So if you feel perhaps, especially if you're getting spearphished, you want to kind of understand some stuff, or maybe it's not being detected, you want some help with that, send it onto Labs, we can analyze it. It might be something we're already detecting. You know, we do have Sophos email or an email security solution, but it gives you another kind of avenue to sort of get that at least investigated if you're a bit concerned, especially if there are like payloads attached to it and things like that. So you just want to be doubly certain. So yeah, right. Let's grab another question. So, is there a risk? Oh, Colin, you want to say something?
But just last comment on malicious emails and adversary-in-the-middle response actions. If your organization identifies a malicious email that was able to get to one of your users' inboxes, please send that on to Sophos Labs. There's an email address, is-spam@labs.sophos.com. The key is to click on the suspicious email and make sure you do forward as attachment, so that we have all the details about who the sender was, and that so that our labs team can take responsive actions. And again, that's is-spam@labs.sophos.com.
Yeah, fantastic. And you'll find that detailed, I believe, in that same knowledge base article as well. So don't frantically worry if you haven't written down that email address, but it is being kind enough to post it in the chat as well. So yeah, we've got someone say they're using the Report to Sophos Outlook add-on for reporting, which is fantastic. Yeah, absolutely. This shows you how big the company's got. I forget all the various components that we have when it comes to the end user solution, but yeah, there's that sort of add-on as well, which if you're using Outlook, get a nice button. I think we even use that internally. I should know what's set in my own email clients, but I spend too much time in sort of chat solutions nowadays. I'll grab another interesting question that just came on the top that said, can Sophos MDR block live logins from impossible travel locations? So not so much as block. I don't believe we've got the API access to do blocking actions for those kind of actions, but we have been. So I've talked about this in the past. If you come on the regularly into the threat card, where we started doing these sort of compound detections for M365, because one of the things we found is that relying on Microsoft detections themselves, some of them are really sluggish to come through. So some could actually, because they're like AI analyzed or whatever, some of them were not coming through for like hours. Some were actually, I think the slowest one come through was like 24 hours. We started writing kind of our own by looking at the raw telemetry source, which is why it's really important if you are using MDR. Well, you should don't know how you got to our meeting otherwise. But if you go into as Colin points out, go into Central and look at the integrations. Go and integrate both the Microsoft ones. So there's one for, I think, Security Graph and one for probably like, I forget what it's called, like Universal Audit Log or something like that. There's two Microsoft or M365 integrations, two very different APIs that both need authenticating by you. If you give us both of those, it lets us start doing these clever kind of compound detections. And so going back to the whole like impossible travel locations. So I can't speak to that one particularly because I'd have to look at detections now. But the kind of things that I remember us looking at when we did the first round of these compounds was looking at things like multiple like IDs, like browser IDs and so on in the same user session. So like if someone's showing up in like multiple places or they're logged in on like different devices, that already today is something that starts sending off some signals for us to look into. I haven't got my dashboard open to actually see how many cases we had that are coming from those detections. But yeah, they're incredibly high fidelity as well. So I mean, if you are an M365 customer, please go and use those two integrations. Let's grab another question. Oh, is there another one? It's just dropped in there. Let me just check. So can we confirm the KBA link for CBE emails? I'm not certain what CBE is. If it's coming back as not found. Oh, you tried using the link? What I'll do is we'll confirm the link and let me go and I'll see if we can get it back into the chat in a second, or if one of my colleagues can go grab the URL and just make sure we got the correct one. Let's post it in the chat if it hasn't already been done so. Let's have a look. Oh yeah, there we go. Colin's already posted the exact detection. Right, let's go back to questions. So another one is there a risk of Chrome vulnerabilities being in other Chromium-based apps? So this, I think, will be going back to one of the things Morgan was highlighting about that V8 and WebAssembly JavaScript thing. I don't know the ins and outs of that vulnerability, but it's probably worth noting that there's a lot of things based on Chromium, which is the open source project of which Google Chrome is built off of. I believe Edge is also based off of that. I think, someone can correct me, I think the Brave browser is also based off of Chromium. But there's plenty of other things as well, like Electron, which is a framework for making a desktop app out of a web app. So I think things like Discord is also an Electron app, which is also based on Chromium. So I would say in general, whenever you see these kind of nasty vulnerabilities pop up in Chrome, whether or not you want to go into the ins and outs of this thing, I would then go and check any of these kind of like web apps, like, chat apps and so on, that's using Electron or anything that's based on Chromium, and go and make sure you're getting those updates as well. I think Electron-based apps, I think Electron itself updates once every month or so. I think it's pretty much tries to match the release cycle of Chromium. But yeah, it's pretty good to go and look at what apps you're using. Are any based on things like Chromium? Are they based on Electron? That things that are also derived from Chromium? Maybe kind of maintain that in a register and understand that, because when you see these nasty vulnerabilities pop up in something like Chromium, they can often be shared with other things like, Brave and yada, 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 and Edge. Not always. I can't talk to the one specifically that we just saw. Can't be certain. But I think a good rule of thumb is to go and always just look at anything that's Chromium-based and see if you can get it updated, because it may also be vulnerable. So yeah, good question. Let's see what else we got here. Let's see. Interesting. What ones I can chip off before I pass them to one of my colleagues. We've got a lot of remote workers, and we do manage their work laptops. They don't use personal devices. But what can we do about home routers and mitigate risks like Raptor Train? Right. So this is also about what Morgan was talking about, which was Raptor Train botnet, which was compromising sort of Soho routers, the kind of home routers that people use. I have a personal opinion on this. Now, I'm sure people in chat might disagree with me. Zero Trust is an amazing solution, especially because it's less costly than running lots of like VPN tunnels and so on, where you have to backport all their entire internet connections somewhere. But I do think if you're ever concerned and you've got remote workers and you've got the capability of just actually running gateways, maybe in the cloud or running them physically and using VPN to just tunnel all their traffic, it does mean that the only thing exposed to the attacker at that remote worker's home as their connection's going outbound is the connection to the VPN tunnel. It will kind of reveal that, but I'm sure you're going to be revealing any other kind of security solutions if they sat there monitoring the wire. But at least with the VPN, they're not being able to sort of inspect those packets because they're all getting encrypted over the tunnel. So yeah, I mean, remote workers is a really tough one. Let's see. Another question, which was about would ad blockers help with regards to the Mathos info stealer? So I think this is again going back to Amos, which was Sean was just talking about. There's a couple of things. Ad blockers always, so SEO poisoning and malvertising are huge, and they're literally like adverts that are showing up in the search engines, totally sort of legitimate in the sense that it's an advert served up by the search engine. It just so happens to be that whoever's now using that feature, it's been compromised. Ad blockers often just block the box that shows us things. So I do think it's a good thing. Sean, I'll let you jump in one second. I'll finish my thought. I guess the other thing I want to point out was that, like, if you're using macOS in general, Gatekeeper's awesome. There's two things about it. I think one, macOS Sequoia, which is either just come out or is coming out. I can't remember if people have got the update yet. I'm on the preview channel for macOS. But Gatekeeper's had a change where like control click won't work anymore, which is great. But also, a lot of people don't know, like with Macs, there are configuration profiles, and you can actually manage things like I've written this down, I've got a note over here, the allow identified developers feature. So whether you're going to let Gatekeeper and any user on a Mac run an app that's from the App Store, or whether they also let them use something that's from not out of the App Store, but it's also signed, so you can control that. And there's also like an assessment feature which allows Gatekeeper to assess the application to a sense and see if it's if there's anything kind of slightly out of the way and sort of untoward about it. I don't think it's like a full AV solution, but it's an additional layer of security. You can actually control those through configuration profiles. So you can actually go and force users only to be able to use apps from the App Store, for instance. That negates those risks of them downloading things straight away. Let's say if you're in a corporate environment, don't let them do that. And then the other thing is with the enable assessment feature, making sure that's set to true. It does mean that Gatekeeper's going to check the application, check combinations of things, and ensure that, it's got an idea. Basically, don't disable Gatekeeper. Make sure the users can't do that either. Make sure you're controlling it. And then Sean, sorry, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that, so we've seen a lot of malware using advertising or search engine optimization as a method of getting onto users' systems. It's not just Amos, for example. We've seen them as a long-running tactic of bootloader and Gootkit. It's also a way that Chrome Loader frequently ends up on people's machines because they advertise for common tools to be installed, including browser extensions. So using ad blockers helps, but also being very conscious of the URLs that are associated with ads that are related to your search. Often the domain names are a good tell that, this is not an actual website for downloading something, but it's a compromised WordPress installation that was used as a staging site for malware. So ad blockers definitely go with them. I hate to say that as somebody who used to work in media, but you gotta use the ad blocker, and also be very, very conscious of the URLs you click on it that come up in both organic search and in search engine advertising. That's all I got.
That's a great point. The especially when it comes to like the prevalence of these kind of things. We've talked about this so many times now. I think it's literally the last ThreatCast we've flagged this up about. I think it's in the most unwanted last month. It tells you to look at the URL bar. So I implore, go check out last month's post. It's on the MDR community channel. See the link on the screen right now. It was in last month's ThreatCast post, and in there, the most unwanted image actually talks to this. So if you want something as a quick little snippet or something to build off of to educate your users, you've got to start training people to know, what the URL bar is. That's something that still baffles me when you find lots of people just don't use the URL bar. You open up a tab, it takes you to a search engine, you type in the thing, and then you click the thing. Very few people seem to, although I guess if you've been around, using the internet as long as many of us have, but a lot of younger users especially, and even some older users aren't used to the URL bar as a concept or even interacting with it or even paying attention to it, so making them aware of it. Then also reading the URL, right? And how to sort of note that it's not quite, there's something kind of off about it. But I think in general, ad blockers, and especially when it comes to macOS as well, just, because there is the App Store, and I think most apps do publish, especially, most sort of all ones you're going to need in a corporate environment will be publishing on the App Store. That does mean you've got like a source of truth for the official, and you don't have to worry about users going anywhere else. You can just guide them, use that, But again, check the URL, especially on Windows machine. That's still threat vector. This is the same attack path, different operating system as the target. That's still, URL bars are always going to be useful to everyone, worth teaching people, especially on their own personal machine. We're coming up to time, so I think I want to do maybe one more, and maybe we wrap Morgan, or Morgan actually, if you're still with us, Morgan. I'm just about Crimson Palace, but was someone asking whether the Crimson Palace payloads have been seen or used elsewhere? They also say great write-up. And is there going to be a part 3?
Two good questions. The majority of the malicious payloads that we observed in the stage 2 of the campaign were open source and off-the-shelf tooling. So as opposed to the first stage of the campaign where we did see custom, never seen before malware such as the Poco proxy implants, the second stage we just saw them rotating a bunch of different open source tooling, such as Havoc or Zebro, and even things like open source EDR bypass tools like Real Blinding EDR. So most of them were very widely used malicious payloads. In terms of the part 3, that remains to be seen. We're still trying to, cover everything that happened in stage 2. So stay posted for a stage 3. I don't think we haven't started on the formulation of a blog yet, but given the amount of activity that has been happening in this campaign, if we do see additional intelligence worth reporting, we will share it.
Fantastic. Thanks, Morgan. I'm just going to finish one last thing for the chat. There was just someone just doing a follow-up around those Microsoft 365 so detections for the adversary in the middle. I was just going to comment that it was detect only. And so yes, those are, I think, detect only at the moment. We are investigating and we plans to try and get better, the additional API integrations with Microsoft 365 to start taking more complex response actions. But our team's very quick to respond to those. So I can say the Microsoft M365 detections that we've written are like some of the most high fidelity detections we have. So our team loves them because they know that if one's gone off, you're not going to be investigating, a benign threat. It's going to be highly likely to be true positive. So yeah, the kind of the M365 detect, we have all this, SAS hyphen something, but they're very popular with, straight to say, but they're popular with our operators. They're valuable to look at. Yeah, all right, let me just jump onto the last little bit of things to say. So again, thanks so much for attending. You can find everything that we've been discussing, all the show notes, the recording and so on in the MDR community channel. You can find that link there. We also do the threat brief, which is in a sub-page on that, in announcement, where we put other things. So in announcement, you'll also find the threat brief. It's our weekly threat intelligence sort of blog post. So you can go find that. Make sure you click that button on the right to subscribe and get it into your inbox. The show notes are here, but we'll put the full ones on the community channel, so don't panic too much. And I guess I'll just sort of wrap this up by just saying thank you again for attending. Thank you for staying, staying all the way through, for really caring about cybersecurity, to wanting to learn what's going on. Again, knowledge is a very powerful weapon against adversaries. When we're here talking about what they're getting up to, and we can start changing either end users' behaviors, changing our tactics and techniques and procedures and how we defend against them. It's a really crucial part of it. So thank you for really caring about it. And thank you for instilling us with your trust to aid you in defending your organization. I think it's on behalf of everyone at MDR. It's an honor and a privilege. Anyway, hopefully we'll see you next month. And thank you so much for attending. You take care. Cheers.